Welcome to Unstuck and Unstoppable, the podcast for ambitious women who know they're capable of more and ready to stop settling for less than they're truly capable of. So many of the women I work with are successful on paper. They've built impressive careers, they're brilliant at what they do, and they often the people everyone else relies upon. Yet underneath that success can be a quieter story, the story that says, don't take up too much space. Don't disappoint people. Don't ask for too much. Keep proving yourself. Keep saying yes. And over time, we become experts at abandoning ourselves. My guest today on the podcast, Sophie Jane Lee, you are going to absolutely love her. She believes that's one of the biggest reasons women stay small. Now, Sophie is an author, journalist and founder of Electric Peach, an award-winning brand storytelling agency working with social impact organisations and SMEs, an NCJ qualified journalist with bylines in The Guardian, Fast Company, Entrepreneur and Huffington Post. She was named one of the UK's top 100 inspiring female entrepreneurs by Small Business Britain, and she speaks internationally on power, voice and courageous communication. Now, her new book, which I have absolutely loved, is called Beyond Palatable, a Manifesto for Unapologetic Women. She challenges us to question the stories we've inherited about who we're allowed to be and what we're allowed to want. In this conversation, Sophie and I explore why women shrink themselves to make others comfortable, what self-abandonment really looks like in our careers and relationships, why boundaries feel so difficult, and why doing the inner work isn't about fixing yourself, it's about coming home to who you really are. There were so many moments in this conversation that made me stop and reflect, and I know you'll find yourself doing the same. So grab a cuppa, take a breath, and let's dive in. Sophie, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast as a guest. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Pleasure. Now, your career has taken you from corporate life to entrepreneurship, speaking, and now becoming an author. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your career story and what spurred you to write the book?
My career started in Shanghai when I was in my early 20s, when I pestered my way into becoming a journalist at Shanghai Daily. And when I say pestered, I mean literally showed up over and over and over again at Shanghai Daily, which is the only English-speaking newspaper in Shanghai, just saying, give me a column, give me a chance. And I had no right to be there whatsoever, but I had decided that I was gonna, by hook, no crook, is that even an expression? I was going to find a way to become a professional writer. And eventually, probably just to stop me from showing up at their offices so often, they gave me a column, and that column turned into a weekly column, which turned into a double-page spread, which turned into a front-page feature, which then turned into a career in journalism. And I moved back to the UK, quickly realised that I didn't want to have any part to play in the hack life of a British journalist, moved into content marketing by accident and started working in businesses and really bridging that gap between marketing and communications. And then I started my own business 9 years ago in September, and we focus specifically on using the tools of marketing to help businesses and organizations who have a social or environmental impact at their core to reach the right people and galvanize them to take action beyond just selling a product or service. And in that whole process, I have had the real honor of listening to so many different stories and working with people of all ages, all the way from university students up to very, very senior C-suite executives. And specifically women, hearing them tell their stories over and over again and seeing a pattern of diminishing and shrinking their brilliance. And I do a lot of public speaking training now, and I see the same pattern playing out where a woman will take to the stage, she'll have so much amazing stuff to share, and then it's almost like the shame hangover hits immediately, and she shrinks herself back down and apologizes for taking up space and doesn't want to be seen as being too full of herself or too big for her boots. So the cycle continues. And that was what prompted me to start investigating the ways in which we shrink ourselves, abandon ourselves, make ourselves less than in lots of different ways in pursuit of making others more comfortable and ourselves more comfortable, because it's actually very uncomfortable for women to shine in their full light. And that's what then led me to write Beyond Palatable.
I love your story because there's obviously a theme that goes through it around telling stories, telling other people's stories. And as I said it to you earlier, I love the fact your book is peppered with your stories as well. I also love the fact, as you're right, that women shrink ourselves, and a lot of the clients that I work with don't feel like they can own the space, own the room, and be their full selves at work, sometimes outside work as well, which is why I love the book and it resonated so much. And I must just show you, the book has got so many post-it notes attached to it because I was like, oh my God, that's so relevant to my clients. And I wanted to dive into one thing particularly that you mentioned, which is the self-abandonment trap. And I wondered if you could just tell our readers who won't have read your book yet a bit more about how that shows up for women.
The self-abandonment lens of the conversation around shrinking ourselves to fit in is really something that I came to because I trained in somatics, which is the connection between mind and the body. Which is the connection between mind and the body. And I started to understand visibility from the perspective of the nervous system and the importance of safety in order to be our full self, in order to be able to connect with our truth. And self-abandonment is something that we are trained from a very young age. The idea that we must always prioritize everybody else over ourselves in every single situation, and that to do anything less than that is desperately selfish. And being a woman, being selfish is one of the worst, most abhorrent things you can be. And I realized doing the research and having these conversations with women from all generations across different countries, cultures, religions, that this is such a insidious form of control that has woven its way through millennia and generations of women. And it's one of the main things that keep women small now, but it's also really misunderstood. And a lot of the empowerment conversation focuses on fixing yourself and getting more confident and curing your imposter syndrome, which I don't believe is a thing. But actually, so much of this is a dysregulated nervous system because we have been trained to find regulation in the abandonment of ourselves, which causes more dysregulation within ourselves.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that connection with the body because I think we are so disconnected often from how we feel and naming our feelings. For women, say, in the workplace, how might self-abandonment show up? Like, how might they know that they are abandoning themselves?
It can come in lots of different ways. So most common would be someone makes a comment and it feels really gross, but you don't say anything. You let them say it. Or you get asked to do something, and women hold up an awful lot of unpaid labour in the home and in the workplace. So it could be that you're just really great with people and can you, Sarah, just take on the job of planning this person's retirement party. And if you don't mind, just go and find them a present. And can you also, while you're there, go and have a chat with Susan because she's having an issue. And none of these things are paid and none of these things are counted towards your career progression. And you don't actually have the capacity to do any of them, but you keep saying yes anyway. Or it could be that you go to the PTA and you hate the PTA and you hate the mums in the PTA, and every time you come home from the PTA you feel so angry you have to have several glasses of wine to recover from your experience with the PTA, but then the next month you go back to the PTA again. And it plays out in so many different ways, and most of it can be found when internally you're screaming no and externally you're saying, sure, can I do anything else for you? How else can I be of service today?
Yeah, it's that lack of congruence, isn't it, between how we really want to be and how our outer self is
Exactly.
presenting.
And there's that whole thing of, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no. And I think that's completely ridiculous, because how many things in life really are a fuck yes? Like, very few. Sadly, like, it's just life though. Like, it's not even, it's just life. But when it's a fuck
It
no
is.
and you still say yes, that's the issue.
And we're going to come on and talk about boundaries a little bit later on, because I really want to pick your brains around giving people techniques that can help them with setting those boundaries. But I do want to talk about the Triad of Oppression, because I love that part of the book too, because I think we, as you said, we're often told we just got to fix that, we've got to be more visible, more confident, whatever, and we just got to fix ourselves. But actually we're operating within this kind of society pressures that have, as you say, been around for years, of the Triad of Oppression, which, for people who haven't read your book, I'm just going to ask you very briefly to explain, because I think it's really helpful for women to understand we are operating within this system. So Sophie, for people who haven't read the book, could you just explain a bit more about the Triad of Oppression?
The Triad of Oppression is patriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism. And they intersect in so many ways to create oppressive systems. And the reason that I put this in my book is because, not just because it's really important to understand the systems that we exist within, but also because it's really important to have this conversation, particularly for me as a white woman who's very privileged in lots of ways, talking about something that needs to be considered through an intersectional lens. So it's important to say that these systems impact people differently depending on the different ways that they are minoritized in society. And the three sides to it, it's like the patriarchy we understand as being, I think we think patriarchy is about like men ruling the world. We don't understand that it's actually about the system that was created to pass down power through families. So it literally means the rule of the father. Women are, by our biological nature, matrilineal creatures, which means we stay close to our mothers. We have a line of DNA that only goes through the mother line, that will be able to be traced back through women forever, for the entirety of their generations, called mitochondrial DNA, which is absolutely fascinating. And yet, so it's not natural for us to leave our maternal world and go and be transplanted into another family. But that's what patriarchy did and was. And so women would then go into another family, oftentimes would take up the role of caregiver within that family. Maybe money would be passed, so it's like literally buying or selling. And that was what patriarchy was. And it was an important way of our ancestors keeping control, particularly in context of land and agriculture and all of the things that developed when we became farmers instead of foraging.
And I guess breaking that matrilineal line as well, so reducing the autonomy and support that women had.
Exactly.
That line.
And that's the other thing, is that human beings are programmed for co-regulation. And we women need the sisterhood to parent effectively, to regulate ourselves, to regulate our children. It was such an essential part of our evolution, as it is. You can look at this now in bonobos, one of our closest ancestors, and you can see how important it is for them to have these matrilineal societies. And so patriarchy is really a very wonky, very much about ownership, land, power process. And then capitalism comes on top of that, which is also about power, money, ownership. And then white supremacy layers on top of that, which says that whiteness is the top standard and everything else is looked through the lens of that and is deemed on a level of not good enough, and oftentimes really discarded, and it does a huge amount of damage. So for women, when we're looking at how we navigate the world, we have to understand that we're navigating within a system that is layered against us in the first place and against our biological makeup. And I think that's really, really important, because this isn't about, oh, women are better than men, or men suck, or any of the stuff that's now feminism has kind of evolved into, which I think is really unhelpful. It's actually about the fact that we can see in every single context of our society that the way that we are living does not work at all. The way that we work doesn't work, the way that we are living doesn't work, the way that we treat our environment doesn't work. We are literally insane creatures engineering our own demise in so many ways. And so much of that can be traced back to a system that has been created that does not benefit really anybody. And yet we hang on to it so tightly, and it just doesn't make any sense. And I think it's because people don't understand it.
And I think that's why it's so great to have it in the book. I know it's really hard, but do you see, or have you seen, are we making any progress as women? Because we're trying to operate within that structure, within that system. Are we making progress?
We're making progress when we decide that instead of trying to change, we're going to create differently. And there are lots of examples. I mean, there are lots of examples of societies and cultures around the world today that still operate as matrilineal societies. And there's a lot we can learn about that. What I do think we have gone awry with, particularly in the West, is that we have commercialized feminism. And I say we because women are very much part of making that happen. And one of the things that could be quite triggering for people if they're not in a position to open themselves up to being challenged when they read my book is that I'm not blaming patriarchy as something outside of ourselves for this experience. I'm very much talking about us being part of that system. And for a lot of women, particularly women who are wealthy from the West and white, we do have quite a significant role to play in how those systems of oppression are upheld. And I see that a lot in empowerment culture, in the coaching industry. I see it a lot in the coaching industry, in how women treat one another, in how we shut doors on one another, on the whole story of being, from the beginning that we were talking about, of being too full of yourself, of being too big for your boots. That often comes from other women. It is other women who teach us that we need to stay small and that there is a danger in putting ourselves out there, being the tall poppy. And the reason that I talk about these systems is because what I really want is to hold a mirror up and for people who read the book to realize that they have a role to play, because that's, to me, that's true power. When you take back the power and think, I'm going to do something about this in my behavior to others, that's how we change the system.
Yeah, and I love that because it is about personal choice, isn't it? We all have choices about how we choose to show up, how we choose to support one another, how we choose to be in the workplace. So it's good to know we're operating within this system, but if we want the system to change, we also have to look internally and decide how we want to be and what we want to be sending out into the world. A lot of the clients that I work with, they're female leaders. They are often struggling with visibility, with that sense of being their full self. And I did love that part of your book as well, is that's the aim. We want to be our full self.
We want to be full of ourselves. That's the ultimate goal.
Yes, full of ourselves, full selves and full of ourselves. And so often my clients shy away from that because they don't want to be seen as arrogant or too full of themselves. Do you have maybe specific techniques that someone could use to help them feel more comfortable with owning that version of themselves?
I think it's important to qualify what I mean by that, because arrogance is really the opposite. Arrogance is born from insecurity and trying to prove ourselves in some way, and this is the opposite of that. This is about being so well resourced and knowing yourself so well and trusting yourself that you can navigate from a sense of self-truth. And sometimes that means holding back because we live in the system, and there are times, and I consider myself to be probably quite unusually honest in every context, and I can be because I'm self-employed, so that really helps. And there will be times when I'm working with specific clients, particularly clients from certain cultures with certain expectations, that I will hold back parts of myself to manage that relationship. And that is an intentional choice. I don't feel like I'm abandoning myself because I'm doing it because I am aware of what is expected in this communications dynamic. And that's really, really important because that's still coming from a sense of self-truth and self-trust. And also creating space and holding the door open for others and allowing them to shine is also coming from that space of self-truth and self-trust. So I wanted to say that before, because a lot of people hear that and think that it means you have to be bold and out there and rah and like taking up all the space, when actually it could be really quiet and really considered and really intentional. And a lot of the time that's so powerful because it has more of an impact on other people. But when we're full of ourselves, it's because we are aware of who we actually are. We are aware of our impact. We are aware of our brilliance. We're not sacrificing parts of ourselves or trying to outsource our worth to other people. And that for me is the key point of it, so that you can get to a point where Barry from finance can say something shitty to you and it's not going to derail your day because you know who you are. And Barry from finance has no idea who you are, and you just get on with it and you deal with it and you move through from a place of self-trust. And how you get to that point, that is really, it's a long process. And I don't think there's one way or a shortcut way to do that, because we have to understand that so much of why we abandon ourselves, so much of outsourcing our worth, comes because of layering of stories and messages that we're not good enough. And everywhere we look, we have those messages in advertising, on social media, maybe from our parents. And so it takes time and picking back the layers to understand quite how much that conditioning has fucked you up, to be honest, excuse my language, and what you're going to do about it. So the first step is always awareness, but that looks different for everybody.
Yeah, and you're completely right. It's doing that inner work, isn't it, on yourself, so that you are filling yourself up with that resilience, with that authenticity, so that then you can choose how you show up, rather than it being full of yourself is projecting all of that externally, but it's actually it's an internal fullness and understanding who you are, what your values are, what your non-negotiables are, and what your value is, and really getting clear on that before anything else. Because again, so much of the self-development world, really ironically, isn't about self-development at all. It's all about appearances or performances, whereas this is actually really quiet, really slow and spacious, and it's not sexy. Like a lot of the time it's actually quite painful, and you might feel like you've mastered it, and then something else comes up and you realize that there's another story that you're harboring within yourself that you need to work on. But it's about really becoming curious as to what are those stories that are driving you, and in what ways are they controlling your life? In what ways are you allowing your beliefs about who you are and who you get to be stop you from living the life that you truly want to live? And I think that that's a great message to be telling people, that it is about doing the hard work. It's about committing to wanting to give yourself what you really need and unpacking, as you say, all those stories. It's a bit probably like an onion. There's constant layers underneath it. But I think the hard thing, and I see this sometimes with my clients, is, and it's partly societal too, is everyone wants a quick fix. They just want to have a technique or a this or a that, and then they're fixed. And what I'm saying to them is there's a lot of work that you have to do. It's reprogramming your thinking, it's understanding where that's coming from. And I think it's hard because life is so busy for everybody now. Work's busy, life's busy. How do we create that space to do that inner work in a way that is sustainable, so we don't think, oh, it's too hard, or I don't have the space for it? How can we do that?
I can give you the example actually of how I've done it over the last 9.5 months. So I did not expect to get pregnant at the time of launching a book. And then I found myself growing 3D printing, as I like to call it, because it really is like 3D printing. It's wild. A baby at the same time as finishing the book, launching the book, doing a 9-city book tour, running and growing a business, preparing that business to operate without me while I'm on maternity leave, etc. And I've never felt more full of myself and my own power and my own majesty than I do now. And I did not have the time or the space to create moments of self-discovery or any of that stuff. It had to become a daily ritual, a practice that I could weave into everything else. And sometimes all that takes is just to have a moment and checking in with yourself and really feeling into your body, having a moment to breathe. Sometimes that would be a moment of reflection. However, I'm not a massive fan of journaling, to be honest, which is weird because I love writing. But some people love journaling. It could be as simple as building daily reflections in with your family. So my husband and I do something called live dinners, where once a month we will sit down and go through a specific set of questions around what's working in our lives right now, what are we proud of, what's not working, how can we help each other out more, and just creating those spaces that's sort of part of what you're already doing in your life that brings that reflection in. Because ultimately what this is about is getting curious and asking yourself deeper questions and giving yourself the space to answer those questions honestly. And it sounds really easy because it's actually really not that easy to do.
No, I think you're right. If you can build a habit where you just spend even just 5 minutes just asking yourself one question can be really powerful. Reflection is such a superpower that people underrate. But I also like your life dinner suggestion as well.
And you can do it for
really
yourself.
Great.
It doesn't have to be with a partner, but just maybe you're going to eat dinner. So just have the dinner be the moment that you spend reflecting on specific questions. I think a lot of people don't give themselves any time. And I get it because it can feel scary, because what if the answers aren't something that you feel like you can deal with right now? Yet at the same time, those answers, that truth is still stored within your body. So if you're not giving it space to be heard, it's not going away. Just because you pushed it down doesn't mean that it's not there, and it will cause other issues in other ways. For me, it can be self-sabotage. What's my number one thing that I go to, my number one toxic behavior. And if I'm not fully aware of what is driving me at any given moment, then I can completely turn into a tornado of destruction, and have many times. And when you read my book, and you obviously know, Sarah, that I have been on a mad campaigns of self-destruction, and a lot of that has been because I've refused to listen to what's really going on for me beneath the surface.
Yeah, it's bringing it from the unconscious into the conscious, isn't it? And then when it's conscious, you can choose what you want to do with that information that you're receiving.
Because over 80% of our behaviour is driven by unconscious beliefs and systems running in the background. And that's just being human. But the more that we can be aware of what that is, the more consciously that we can choose our behaviours, and the more intentionally we can create our lives and outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I've got to talk to you about boundaries because I know this is like a key for a lot of my clients, for a lot of the people listening. And you talk about in your book the art of boundaries. If somebody is feeling guilty every time they say no, which is often a common thing, isn't it? Particularly when you've had years of saying yes to stuff that you don't really want to say yes to. How should they manage that? What could they utilise to help them get through that?
First of all, feel it. It's normal. Like completely normal. And a feeling of guilt doesn't mean that you are guilty. It means that you are having a response to something that is new and different, and that you have been told that you should feel guilty about that thing. So then that is the thing coming up. Of course there are levels, like sometimes you feel guilty and you should feel guilty, but I'm going to trust that you're discerning enough to know the difference between those things, because it will be preposterous. I have it sometimes with work where even at 9 months pregnant, and I give myself a break and I feel guilty about it because I've been so conditioned into hustle mode, striving, working, that any kind of break feels like something I should feel guilty for. That's preposterous. So the more that you can be in the feeling, the uncomfortable feeling, and not try to change it, the more your body and your brain registers, actually, this is okay and this is safe. And of course, we also have to navigate other people and how they don't like it. If you've been pleasing them for a long time, they're probably not going to be pleased when you stop pleasing them. That again is an uncomfortable experience that you need to find a way to navigate and regulate yourself through, rather than trying to fix it, because the more you fix it, the more the uncomfortable experience will come back. Whereas the more you can go through it and train yourself to realize that nothing terrible actually happened, you just felt uncomfortable, the more comfortable you get with that feeling and the less it holds power over you. But I should disclaimer and say that that chapter was really hard to write, because it's been one of the hardest things for me to do, and I had this kind of feeling when I was writing it quite a lot. It made me feel like I needed to have a shower, because I wrote so many scripts for ways to set boundaries to help you if you are struggling, that you can just lift up and have that in your arsenal. And even writing them, I was like, ah! And again, that goes back to the conditioning that we have had, which is always sacrifice yourself, never make anyone else uncomfortable. You can be uncomfortable you can make yourself uncomfortable, but never make anyone else uncomfortable. And the flip to that is to go, hang on a second, why is it fine to make myself uncomfortable and everybody else's comfort needs to be prioritized over mine?
Yeah. And I think that feeling it is such helpful advice, because we don't like feeling uncomfortable. Our brains don't like uncomfortable. So we do anything to avoid it or to not have to sit with that feeling. But I think you're right. The more you feel it and realise actually nothing dramatic has happened as a result of it, the more that you can then just move through it. We're all work in progress, aren't we? Which you also reference in the book. We're all still dealing with all of those things that have come up for us through our life journey. We never.
And then when you think you have, that's just when something comes along and knocks you on your ass again, and you are humbled.
Absolutely. Sophie, I could talk to you for hours. There's so much I could talk to you about, but obviously we do have kind of time to be aware of. So my final question for you would be, if women only remembered one idea from your book, Beyond Palatable, what do you think it should be?
Stories that you tell yourself directly influence what you allow yourself to have in your life, which directly influences your life. And the first place to start and finish always is, what is the story that I'm telling myself about this? Because whether that's the promotion that you want, whether that's that you want to write a book, whether that's that you want to be a journalist, you've got no business whatsoever being a journalist, whatever that might be, what is often stopping us from, and again, yes, we know that there are these systems we are living within this system, and it is not an equal playing field. But also what is stopping so many of us from being the brightest, most brilliant version of ourselves is the story that we're telling ourselves about what we are worth, what we deserve. And if we can start being really accountable to that, so much will change, because when we can start being self-resourced and self-full, then we no longer have competition between others. We no longer envy others. We no longer project our shit onto others. And it makes such a huge difference interrelationally, as well as the experience that we have and create for our own lives.
That is such a powerful ending. And I love that, because I often talk with my clients about stories and narratives and how they can rewrite them or work with them. So I think that's so fantastic to have that as a reminder for everybody, that the stories you tell yourself do dictate the kind of life that you end up leading, and you can change those stories. You are able to edit, rewrite those 100%. Stories.
And as you know, Sarah, and anyone, when you read the book, you will realise that I am talking from experience, and that I had lots of very, very limiting stories and beliefs about myself, and that created so many issues in my life. So I know what can be achieved through working through that.
Yeah. And the brilliant thing about your book as well is there are lots of activities that people can undertake to help them explore some of the issues and the areas that you're talking about, which I think is really helpful, really great. So, Sophie, if people wanted to contact you, where should they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Sophie Jane Lee, on Instagram, Electric Peach Studios or Beyond Palatable. My website is electricpeach.co.uk and Beyond Palatable is beyondpalatable.com.
And I will put links to all of Sophie's contact, website, etc. in the show notes. Thank you again, Sophie, for joining me. It's been a fantastic discussion.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. My biggest takeaway from speaking with Sophie is that becoming unstuck isn't about becoming somebody different. It's about giving yourself permission to become more fully yourself. Now, perhaps you've recognised yourself in some of what we discussed today. Maybe you're the person saying yes when every part of you is screaming no. Perhaps you've been outsourcing your worth to promotions, praise, or other people's approval. Or maybe you've realised that some of the stories you've been carrying about yourself simply aren't serving you anymore. The good news is that those stories can change. You don't have to have it all figured out, and there isn't a quick fix. The work is quieter than that. It's found in the small moments of reflection, the boundaries we choose to hold, and the courageous decision to stop shrinking ourselves, to fit comfortably into spaces where we've already outgrown. If you'd like to find out more about Sophie and her book, Beyond Palatable, you'll find all the links in the show notes. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you would share it with another woman who needs to hear it. Leave a review or do subscribe so you never miss a future episode. Until next time, remember you don't have to stay stuck. You can become unstuck and unstoppable, one brave step at a time.